We've finally reached that time, the end of the college football season, which means we look to the 25 football season. What are UCLA's expectations? I think an increase in success.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Again, visit FanDuel.com to get started. And where we get started today is, all right, college football season. It's finally come to a close. And as much as I hate to say it, that dude who just skipped town and landed somewhere in Columbus ended up getting the happy ending he wanted. Well, that sucks for us as UCLA fans. But we're in a new era, and we're not going to just leave over coaches who decided to dip and not be a part of the program. We're fully in this DeShaun Foster era. And I know nothing really went according to plan when it came to UCLA, and they could have fired Chip, all those things. That's old news. And what has DeShaun Foster done? He went through the first year where UCLA logged as many miles pretty much as Hawaii does on a yearly basis for their football program. And they only play 4 or 5 road games a year. And UCLA did that with 6 road games, a trip to Hawaii, going all the way to the East Coast to play Rutgers, going to play Penn State, lots of road games at LSU, top-tier atmospheres, and the Bruins face some of the best teams in the Big Ten, and it's only going to be tougher. Now, the Bruins are going to be counting their dollar bills pretty soon. But until then, what we want to do is build a program. And what DeShaun Foster has done after year one was address the needs on the coaching staff and do his best with his recruiting team to address the needs that have plagued UCLA these last couple of years. Now, am I saying every single player is going to be a hit, whether it's a high school recruit or a transfer portal guy? No. It's not every single guy is going to come out there and be an All-American, but the hope is it can be some stability or an improvement over a player or a piece or whatever player may have left the program, graduation or otherwise, and UCLA wants to fortify the position with growing the program as a whole. All right, I know it didn't come this year in this last season, the 24th season, in terms of wins and losses for UCLA. Falling short of a bowl game after how they started and were sprinting to the finish, 2 cracks at it, and they failed against Washington and USC. Would have been a nice end to this regular season to get to that bowl game. But even then, 5-7, considering how terribly they looked against Hawaii to start the year, even in a win, and how much they improved. And despite all the players who left, you have to admire how the team stayed together, played hard, as much as they might have been struggling offensively, struggling to block, having some penalty issues. The team overall had a growth period from their 1-5 start to racing into bowl contention with some strong road wins against some pretty decent, pretty solid in some aspects, Big Ten teams that went out to have good seasons. In UCLA hurt the season for, Rutgers. They shocked Iowa in their minds with UCLA winning that game in the Rose Bowl, and they had a good, strong finish to the end of the year. They've gone out. They made the changes, right? The big name change was seeing Eric Bieniemy go as the offensive coordinator, and then you move in with Tino Sunseri, who could hopefully be that young guru to help transform and grow all the young quarterbacks. UCLA has an endless list. They have so many young quarterbacks in their system, and it's going to be a starter in the transfer portal, Joey Aguilar, with his new running mate, Cade Robinson, and so many more transfers, 20 to 20 plus with a couple of decommits in there. And UCLA, with what was a big on early signing day, they swung a late flip on a couple of positions where they lost guys going elsewhere. And with players leaving, I thought they've done a pretty solid job at recouping or gaining new talented players to fit the roster for 2025. Now, all the sunshine pumping, I'm not saying they're going to go win 10 games. They want to emulate the success that they had at Indiana with the Bruins saw firsthand in the Rose Bowl in their first Big Ten game, and everybody's like, uh-oh, myself included, before we realized, oh, Indiana was seeded as a top 10 team in the country, right? And they eventually lost to a team that made it to the national championship game. Can UCLA beat Indiana? As much as I hope so, they're not going to be Indiana in 2025 unless they shock a lot of people like the Hoosiers did. Now, the Bruins, I do expect to go on a growing sense of this season. They're going to have some moments where they underwhelm. That's just going to be the case. But I do expect the Bruins to get to a bowl game and get to 6 to 7 wins. And I know in this day and age with NIL and revenue sharing about to happen with the players, you have all these new things coming with the portal and maybe the shorter, newer window that might be instituted after the 25 season into the 26 calendar in January, if that's approved by the NCAA, as long as they're a legalized institution that controls college football. It is from year to year that you could succeed and become a contender, a true contender in this day and age of a 12-team playoff, make it to a New Year's Six bowl game or whatever big game that it looks like nowadays, right? And UCLA could be on the precipice. Not quite. I think if UCLA is to be successful, reach new heights with DeShaun Foster, it will be a slow burn. As much as we don't want to say it, as much as we don't want to hear that, UCLA, for them to be successful under DeShaun Foster, it'll be a slow burn. The expectations for this year, get to 6 to 7 wins. Hopefully 7, pushing 8. Shock somebody with an upset win, get the Rose Bowl back packed with UCLA fans in there, and go beat a big team or two on the road, like, dare I say, the Ohio States, the USCs of the world coming up on the schedule here in 2025. Because I think it's doable for the Bruins to get to 7 to 8 wins, but you could also see the flip side where, hey, things don't work out. Aguilar turns into a turnover machine, which could be the worry. I don't think they will get all the negative without a lot of positive from their new QB, but that could happen. Offensive line issues, there's still a reasonable world where they can go from 5 to 8 wins and fluctuate between those two as a low and a ceiling. By year 3 in DeShaun Foster's era, I'm hoping UCLA has a clear quarterback for the future. Now, that changes for every team who are going out and having competitive rosters, picking this quarterback, taking that quarterback, finding the newest, shiniest object and putting them in their roster and inserting them as a starter with a big NIL deal, which is bigger than what the rookies are getting for their contracts in the NFL on their 4 to 5 year deals with 1-year NIL super deals in college. UCLA is not going to be able to compete with some of these teams dropping as much money as Carson Beck is going to get to go play for Miami when his elbow heals. That's just not where the Bruins are going to be. And then you go see, if you saw earlier on January 20th, where Indiana laid off a good portion of their athletic administration staff. They didn't cut any coaches, anything that had to do with official teams, but they laid off, media. UCLA is a public school. I wonder, as much as they've got a big new chunk of cash coming in pretty soon, they're still operating with the deficit. There's still a lot of things they need to fix. Is that coming to UCLA's athletic department soon as they want to put in the push to become a football program? Now, are there all the people complaining about Martin Germain's job? Can Julio Frank, when at some point maybe his attention can be given a little bit more towards athletics than it is right now, will there be any sweeping changes, or can everybody keep their job from coaches to scholarships all the way up to administration with just the media liaisons? Because Indiana cut those people. All these other programs are talking about ticket spikes. I just want UCLA in this year to show improvement football-wise. I think they can. I think they will. And then have a clear path for the future. From anywhere with a starting quarterback rising from these youngsters UCLA's found in the portal, the recruits, or the incoming freshmen that is handpicked to be the clear starter in 2026. And some absolute just growth with it, everything for UCLA. I think they're bowl eligible in this year. Could it be completely changed with an injury in the spring practice or a new late get in the later windows of the transfer portal? Sure. But that's where I hope and I believe UCLA is right now. Coming up next, we're talking UCLA men's basketball and kind of taking a little brief look into UCLA Wisconsin, because that's a huge need. It's a huge win UCLA needs to get as they keep tumbling down closer towards the bubble than they would like, as they were from mid-December, now heading into late January. Talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. This message is brought to you by Prize Picks, the place to get real money sports action. Over 10 million members and billions in winnings. Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. It could be the playoffs, it could be the regular season. It's easier than ever with Prize Picks to win big, all while enjoying the football action. And now it's playoff time. It's crunch time. And the way to get in on the action, all you got to do is pick more or less on at least two players. If your picks hit, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Yes, if your picks hit, that's 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. Hey, what you could check out is Travis Kelce going to get more than 70 receiving yards in this next game? Is Josh Allen going to get over under that certain amount of passing yards, 200 passing yards or so against the Chiefs in Kansas City? Then with Prize Picks Flex Play, you can still double your money even if your picks doesn't hit. And sometimes you can get your winnings as fast with the app in just as little as 15 minutes. Run your game this football season by downloading the app, using the code LOCKEDONCollege, and you get $50 instantly. Play your first $5 lineup. Right, just $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, so the UCLA Bruins coming off an absolute domination of the Iowa Hawkeyes. After a lot of struggle for the Bruins, it seemed like they had one of the big victories recently by beating Gonzaga in a neutral site home game at the Intuit Dome. And then everything's really been off the rails for the Bruins. Their big wins have started to lose, other than Arizona. Arizona's been picking it up. Watching North Carolina lose to Stanford at home at the buzzer, brutal. Watching Gonzaga go out, and I'm like, all right, Cronin expects them to win. I'm expecting them to win. They go out and lose to Santa Clara, and they lose to Oregon State. So the Zags starting, 0-2 in the WCC. That's not going to help UCLA's big win prospects. And then with them losing to the Nebraskas, losing to Maryland, you're seeing a shift in seeding. Like for Maryland in the latest bracketology, prior to the UCLA win over Iowa, though, you've seen the Bruins fall all the way down to the 9 seeding. I think the next bracketology is coming out pretty soon. But the latest one from Joe Lunardi, who I believe in the most, I would say UCLA a little bit closer to the bubble. Maybe the next bracketology release will have them close to an 8. But right now, if you look on the ESPN site, they have them at a 9. So floating near the bubble, which means UCLA has to get big wins. Wisconsin representing a ranked top-tier Big Ten opponent with UCLA at home, and you look at the line, they're actually favored in that game at home. The Bruins need to take care of business because they're a loss away from fading out of the Big Ten tournament in that bottom 15 to 18 range, or a couple of wins or a winning streak away from floating in the top 4 and putting themselves back into the upper echelon of tournament seeding in the NCAA tournament and being a 4 or 5 seed. Yet what we've seen this year is a team that's floating as an 8 and has all the potential of making a run, but they haven't shown it on a consistent basis yet, night in and night out, other than that dominant performance against Iowa, which was just, I think, a big mismatch for the Hawkeyes. The Bruins, if it's a team that doesn't guard, isn't more physical, then UCLA is probably going to dominate that matchup with a team that was starving, absolutely hungry for a win, and the Bruins got it. Now, Wisconsin got a big dub against USC on the road. Another Big Ten team that, if you think about it, is already sitting there waiting for UCLA, right? They've been in LA for a while. UCLA to come back. They played USC, or Wisconsin played USC. So all these Big Ten teams are going to play USC first, which means that they get here and they're acclimated to the time. They've been around for a few days. They've gotten out of the cold weather. They're not dealing with any, frostbite from being back in the cold, frozen tundra that is the Midwest at the moment. They come over to the West Side, and Wisconsin's 15-3, 5-2 in Big Ten play, and they can go out and score. This is a team that put up 116 against Iowa and flattened them. 100 points on Arizona and flattened them. Wisconsin is a big team that they are in the top 5 or 6 in the Big Ten when it comes to defensive rebounds per game. Stephen Crowell is somebody to look out for 24.7 officially defensive rebounds per game. What does UCLA struggle with? Teams with size that can outmuscle them and dominate them in the paint, largely by getting rebounds. If the Bruins aren't getting second chance points, even though Cronin might be leaning towards William Kyle, this is where it could be a dangerous Wisconsin matchup. Now, with William Kyle coming out there and playing one of his best games of the season against Iowa, does that mean that Cronin is going to let the transfer big man come in, use his athleticism, and ride him for multiple minutes? You shorten the guard rotation, you add some muscle and athleticism in the paint, and maybe you don't get as beat up in points in the paint. And while Kyle hasn't exactly dominated in the rebounding category, just his presence in the paint alone could help UCLA not just be outworked down low immediately or for long stretches. If that's the case, then that could be a game changer. And I think with Kyle being in the starting lineup, or at least playing a majority of the game, is how Cronin intended for this team to be run. You have Kyle, you have Bilodeau. He's really loved how Daly's played, even with the mask and the injury to his face. And then you rotate between an elite guard defensively with Kobe Johnson. You throw in a point guard. Dalen Andrews played well. Sky Clark's played well. And then he can mix and match that if he wants to go small, if he wants to go big. But Cronin has been forced to go small almost this entire year because he doesn't trust Mata, who didn't even get in that last game. He hasn't fully trusted William Kyle III just yet, and he's also dealt with some medical/injury issues to this point. Wisconsin is physical, and they make a bunch of threes. So this game is going to be simply cut down to, can the Bruins match the muscle and the rebounding ability of the Badgers? If UCLA gets Kyle posted up, okay, I want to see more of his defense and rebounding prowess to help UCLA, which down, if you ship the lineup down, Bilodeau playing as a 4 versus a 4, as opposed to a 4 on a 5, a power forward against a much bigger guy defending him, I think that leaves other guys better able to go attack the Badgers' defense. Wisconsin this year gives up about 7 threes per game, just a smidge over what UCLA makes per game. So if UCLA has a good game shooting the 3 ball, don't be surprised. Where UCLA has to guard is make sure Wisconsin does not get hot from downtown. They make 9 threes, a little more than 9 threes, close to 10 threes per game. So that's a lot of points they're generating from behind the arc. And if the Bruins want to keep pace, you can't let them miss and get their own rebounds. And the Bruins have to be on fire from downtown. So the Bruins have to win 2 categories. Be close rebounding, and I wonder if there will be any more lineup switches or how the first rotation off the bench looks for Cronin. And then 2, can UCLA shoot themselves back into it? How they beat Gonzaga, they shot well. How they're playing well against North Carolina, they shot the ball well. How they beat Oregon on the road, well, they shot the ball well. And how did they beat Arizona? Well, they played some really dang good defense to do so, not allowing a field goal over 8 minutes. Generally, UCLA can play solid defense, force turnovers, not get eaten alive in the paint, and then shoot the 3 ball well. And that's a recipe for a UCLA home ranked win. If they did those things, the Bruins can continue to build that resume, and that's about life in the Big Ten. You get the swings of, all right, you're struggling, you've lost 3 or 4 in a row, you faced a tough stretch where you go from Lincoln to Los Angeles to the East Coast all the way back to LA again in the midst of everything that's happening. Wow, you do get a stretch of every team you're playing is a resume builder. So a win is generally not going to hurt UCLA's tournament credibility. It's not. Especially in conference. At this point, you look at the Big Ten, close to 11, 12, 13. You could see so many teams. You could almost go down the entire standings and see all the teams in the conference tournament, close to 13, 14, making it into the NCAA tournament. So that means every time UCLA is going out, they're contending with a win against the tournament team and slotting themselves into much better seeding. So when it comes down to, hey, maybe it's a battle for last team in, last team out. You saw Iowa was one of those last 4 teams in the last bracketology release, while UCLA is a 9 seed. If for some reason it comes down to a head-to-head, well, UCLA destroyed Iowa. Then if you're going between, hey, UCLA an 8, or if they're going to move towards the West region, a win against the Wisconsins. That's the difference between playing in Denver in the West Regional or going east and going to play somewhere in Wichita and playing Kansas in the second round in their home state. This is all crucial things that could come down to where they play in the tournament and how the bracket could stack in their favor or against them by picking up some wins. Because I do think this is a tournament team. I don't think they will crumble again, but this team does have some clear weaknesses, and hopefully an emergence from Kyle and UCLA not having to lean small so long within a game can lead to more success moving forward in the Big Ten. But against the Badgers, 3-point shooting / defense, rebound the ball. Those two things in UCLA's favor, and they win that game. Speaking of the Bruins in their favor, they dominated the Baylor Bears. Dominated the Baylor Bears in the Coretta Scott King Classic in Newark, New Jersey. We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. If you win your first bet, that's $300 to keep the action going. FanDuel app, it's super easy to navigate a variety of bets to keep every game exciting. And if you win, you get paid instantly. You don't even need to wait around. And whether it's betting on your favorite teams or adding extra excitement, FanDuel has you covered. Visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets on FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, final segment here. We're talking about the UCLA women who had the most dominant day to start off the last full week of January for the most part, right? Technically, February starts on a Saturday, but technically last full 7-day week in the month of January. And the UCLA women had another dominant performance. And they didn't even play well. This team played mediocre, and they still controlled the game against a top Big 12 team, against a ranked Big 12 team. And the Bruins on a neutral court, mind you, on the East Coast, earlier game, dominate the Baylor Bears. They're up, 17-2, and they had a little lapse and ended up being up by 10 in the first quarter. Baylor would get it to 7, and UCLA's not playing well. But the Bears truly couldn't do anything to get much closer. Why? It's because Lauren Betts is an absolute beast in the paint in every positive aspect of that word. 24 points, better than 50% shooting because she's an automatic bucket, it seems like, in the paint. 9 rebounds, 9 assists. Now, she did have her struggles. Consider, not 9 assists, 9 blocks. 9 rebounds, 9 blocks. Couple assists, 5 turnovers, and missed 5 free throws. So one thing is her struggles to shoot free throws, and her turnovers were some eyesores in a game where she nearly had a triple-double with blocks. Rebounds and blocks, and I think Corey Close kept her out there late when UCLA was in clear control of the game just to see if she could get that last block and last rebound, which she did not secure. But a 24-9-9 game is about as dominant as it gets. Don't let the national pundits fool you about Juju Watkins. Cool, good. Paige Beckers. All right. Lauren Betts is right there, as dominant as it gets. All right. There is no team in the country that has been, or I think will be able to, shut down Lauren Betts without her getting into foul trouble. All right. And in this game, she had a couple of offensive fouls. She wasn't even playing her best, leading the Bruins with 5 turnovers of UCLA's 18. All right. So the Bruins played sloppy, couldn't shoot the 3-ball well, even though Kiki Rice knocked down a couple. Still seeing some cold shooting from your 2 best shooters in Jones and Gardner. Those 2 combined to go 1 of 10 from downtown. But UCLA is so deep that Kiki Rice shoots 5 of 7 as a point guard. And it's like, hey, I'll just get an easy 15 points here with a couple of steals. Then Gabby Hawk has 11 points, 13 rebounds. She's as dominant as a rebounder, was the most dominant rebounder on the floor with the offensive boards. She had 5 offensive rebounds. That's more than Betts. That's as dominant as it gets for Gabriela Jaquez, who has earned the right to be a much better name than the younger sister of Jaime Jaquez Jr. 13 rebounds, 11 points. So you got that much production coming out of your starting lineup. Then you've got Janiyah Barker, who had a 10 and 8 game. So you've got 3 players flirting with a double-double, one of which was flirting with a triple-double against a top-tier team in which it wasn't really close. The Bruins didn't shoot well. They missed a couple of free throws. They turned it over. And mind you, that was after the Penn State back and forth. And then Penn State went back home and beat a solid Ohio State team. So maybe Penn State's just about to figure it out. The Bruins won a neutral site home game against Penn State, who then their next game went back home after a longer trip out west and beat a very good Ohio State team. UCLA went east in a neutral site game and dominated Baylor and played much, I don't know if better is the word, but they're just so much better that they can beat these teams by 15 on neutral courts and be in clear control. That's how talented this team is. Now, the thing I want to point your attention to, if you're listening, if you're watching, the game that was supposed to be even better than the UCLA Baylor game was the number 8th ranked Maryland Terrapins taking on the 7th ranked Texas Longhorns out of the SEC. Maryland, in a couple of games, will be UCLA's next premier Big Ten matchup in Maryland. True road game. But Maryland and Texas played right after the UCLA game, and Texas flat out dominated them. They made 20 more field goals, forced Maryland into 27 turnovers, and beat the Terps by close to 40 points on a neutral court. And that's supposed to be UCLA's next toughest matchup for Maryland team that at home almost took down USC, but lost. All right, that's no slouch. But Texas had their way. They didn't hit an absurd amount of threes. They didn't shoot an absurd amount of free throws. They made 12 free throws, hit 3 threes. They just dominated and had 33 points off turnovers to Maryland's 11. So Maryland played awful, got dominated in the paint, and turned it over a lot. I don't expect that type of energy when UCLA plays Maryland in Maryland coming up pretty soon after they go to play Rutgers, which is, not too far, Piscataway. Compared to all these other Big Ten schools, playing in the same state on the East Coast is not that far of travel for UCLA. So they're going to go to Rutgers, and then they'll play a Maryland team who is probably chomping at the bit in a game or two back from UCLA to get from a 4 seed to getting to a 2 or 3 seed. Texas led this game, and Maryland never led. Down 40 points, down 16 at the end of the first, down 30 at halftime. Absolute domination. So as much as I want to point the eyes towards UCLA, the women, it was an expected domination, but their next big opponent in 2 games' time got flattened by Texas. Absolutely flattened. So I wonder how they're going to come out, maybe extra revved up. Yeah, got a game in between. Maybe they're looking forward towards a UCLA matchup. I'm not sure, considering Texas is still pretty darn good. They're a team that has a chance to get a top 4 seed, get a 1 seed, and get a favorable draw to get to an Elite 8. Because I think the Elite 8 this year in women's college basketball is as tight-knit as it gets. What you want as a 1 seed is to get the easiest Elite 8 matchup and then save your tough matchup and tough draw for the Final 4. But in my mind, I think there's close to 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 teams who could all compete, get to the deep parts of the NCAA tournament on the women's side. And it's all battling for who's the number 1 overall seed, UCLA, even though I was reading an article about ESPN where, South Carolina's gaining ground in UCLA in the AP poll. They got 1 first-place vote. And let's not forget, South Carolina's playing well. The Bruins kicked their butt. Now, South Carolina's playing much better and playing very different than how they did against UCLA in Pauley Pavilion. But until they meet again, the Bruins, with the eye test and the on-court dominance, led that game 15 to 20 points, mind you, on their home court, so it won't be the same in the NCAA tournament. The Bruins are the complete, dominant, most complete team in the country. Most complete team for Corey Close's bunch. Yeah, the best weapon in the post, They have one of the best point guards. Now, don't get confused when you see the guards of Watkins and Beckers and all these other players who are very good guards. But Kiki Rice is just fantastic as a point guard. Does everything needed for Corey Close. Can go score or can also get a 10 and 10 game. 10 rebounds, 10 assists, or 10 points. Is capable of doing all that as a guard. One player fast break she is. And can shoot it from 3 on a 2 of 3 basis. And eventually when Jones or Gardner get hot from downtown, this team is unbeatable when any of those two can shoot. And when they're still beating top 25 teams and waxing them on neutral courts, that's a sign of big things to come for UCLA. Again, coming up on the Sunday in late January, they're going to play Maryland. Early matchup on a Sunday morning. Got to be able to watch that, but they do have Rutgers in between on a 3-game East Coast swing. And then we're just a few weeks away from that date that's circled on the calendar, UCLA, USC in the Galen Center the day before Valentine's Day, which will tell us a lot of completely shift or just kind of keep it status quo of what the women's college basketball landscape looks like this year. But until then, the Bruins, number 1 in the country, 18-0, and they continue to kick butt. Get your hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA. Fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.